how do you kind of go in and work with a customer? And let's say the customer is, on the comms or PR side of things, but they're looking for kind of more marketing oriented activities. So how do you go in there and work with not only your customer or the client, but also the marketing team at a large client, maybe an Adobe or someone like that, and ensure the advertising agency that marketing team has brought in? Must be a kind of interesting wrestling and wrangling.
So it depends on how they're organized. Some clients have their marketing and comms team totally siloed off, and they're competitive, and those are, the most difficult. Oftentimes we are working, or we start with comms and then there's some overlap, but those clients are probably the most difficult to sort of, from an integration standpoint, because some of the work that we do, in things like content marketing, are in that gray area in between. Others have communications rolled up into the marketing operation, and again, every company is different, every culture is different, but the ones that are set up like that are sometimes easier because it all rolls up into one thing. And so while there's still some lines in terms of drawn in terms of the differences that the functions do, there's not that competitiveness. So we can come in and we can sort of be working with both, and it's a little bit less competitive.
One of the things that's always interesting about social and digital is there's always something new, whether it was Instagram or then Snapchat and Musical.ly or TikTok or whatever the flavor of the day is. Obviously, it's going to vary to some degree from client to client, but as the global strategy director, I'm sure you have some perspectives that apply universally. How much testing and experimentation do you think brands should be doing today in social digital? Like if you said, given your pie, your pool of money to spend, like what is sort of the investment level for, hey, let's just give this a shot and see what happens?
Look, I don't know if I can give it a percentage. I mean, you should always be doing some kind of testing. What I would say though is that the testing looks different than it does a few years ago. Like Jay, I would say up to maybe 4 or 5 years ago, there were so many new and emerging networks and technologies, and TikTok now is probably an anomaly, but that rate has really slowed down. And so it used to be, I think there's two differences. One, I think that there's less of the social innovation where there was a new network to test and try out and pilot. And so I think, but there's more outside of social, right? So things like voice, or, Adam, you mentioned analytics, just how you can kind of tweak your intelligence, right, system so that your output is actually better, all the enterprise tools. I think that companies need to really prioritize, doing pilots and experiments, but it shouldn't just be social. There's so many other areas that are digital in nature, whether they're internal or external, that you should be piloting, getting some learnings from. I mean, if I had to give a number, I'd say, I think the Google approach of 20% is always sort of good in terms of like at the individual level. I know it's a different context, but I think that's actually like not a bad starting point for experimentation as well.
2 out of 3 people trust a person about a brand more than the brand about that same brand, right? And that is one of the starkest and most powerful mathematical proof points yet for the viability of peer-to-peer influence and what we would consider, I guess, to be influencer marketing. I'm throwing out my air quotes for you listening on the podcast. I suspect that in your work, you are encouraging your clients to do more with sort of peer-to-peer and influencers and less brand saying, hey, we're awesome, trust us, and more showing that other people actually love them as well.
Yeah, so Jay, that's one of the areas that we do a lot of work with clients, is in the influencer marketing space. And we across the whole spectrum of influencers. So we, and this is something that I've been working very closely with. We have partners that work with your, we look at influencers as up to the highest tiers, like traditional celebrities. Now we actually have a group within Edelman that has that. It's a company that we recently acquired, and that's all they do. And so they handle that. And then everything else we sort of then tier the way the industry does as well, like from macro to micro to nano. And then we also think about influencers from the sort of thought space, right? They're your thought leaders, like, and a lot of what you see in the B2B world and your even journalists. And then obviously where a lot of the dollars are flowing are more in that sort of cultural space, right? More of kind of the types of influencers that have direct access to consumers.
My question for you is, how does your team vet? I don't want you to give away your secret sauce, but are there 2 or 3 things you kind of look at when you're vetting a potential spokesperson for a product, kind of a promotion of some sort? What does that look like?
So, I mean, engagement is definitely, and that's what the algorithms look at as well. That's one of the biggest things, like just the sort of health of engagement, how much interaction they get. And I'm forgetting the name of the tool that we're using, but there is a tool that, where we can look at follower counts, but also engagement as well. That is probably one of the number one things, looking at engagement around the content. And then again, like the deeper level of engagement. So obviously going beyond things like likes into, the quality of the comments, and then even just sort of doing some social graphing, looking at sort of the quality of the people that are engaging with them. That is that's a rabbit hole that can run very deep, right? So we can't spend all our time doing that. And there's some technologies, but a lot of that is manual as well. And a lot of it too is actually just good old fashioned vetting, right? Just like doing the Googling and like doing the background checks and making sure that, they haven't been involved in anything that is controversial. Because again, this is why that sort of move from transactional to more of a partnership and sort of, working with influencers ongoing. This is where that investment will pan out as well too, because once you find that sort of team of influencers that you can work with continually, you're also reducing the risk because you know that they're vetted.